Black girl vanished on a camping trip. 5 years later, investigators found something shocking. The morning mist clung to Pine Lake like a secret nobody wanted to tell. Nia Parker stood at the water's edge, her dark skin glistening with dew as she skipped stones across the mirror-like surface. Each stone bounced 3, 4, sometimes 5 times before disappearing into the depths, a skill her grandfather had taught her summers ago, back when life was simpler and friendships didn't feel like walking on broken glass. "You're up early." Nia turned to find her best friend Eliza Harrington approaching, her blonde hair perfectly braided despite sleeping in a tent. Even on a school camping trip, Eliza managed to look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. That was the Harrington way. Everything had to be perfect, polished, pristine. "Couldn't sleep," Nia replied, throwing another stone. This one only bounced twice. "Too much on my mind." The two girls had been inseparable since 7th grade, an unlikely pair that somehow worked. Nia was the scholarship kid with straight A's and a mouth that got her in trouble when she spoke up about injustice. Eliza was old money, quiet privilege, the kind of girl who apologized for existing. But underneath Eliza's polite exterior, Nia had discovered a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it felt like to carry secrets. "About last night?" Eliza's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Nia's stomach tightened. Last night. The confession that had shattered everything she thought she knew about her best friend's family. The secret that made her question whether she really knew Eliza at all. "We need to talk about it, Liz. We can't just pretend." "Yes, we can." Eliza's voice turned sharp, desperate. "We have to. You don't understand what you're asking me to do." The camping trip had been Mr. Peterson's idea, a way to end their sophomore year with team-building exercises and mores around the campfire. 23 students from Jefferson High, 3 teachers, and enough teenage drama to fuel a reality show. Nia had almost skipped it. Money was tight at home, and camping gear didn't come cheap. But Eliza had insisted, even offering to lend Nia her extra sleeping bag and hiking boots. Now Nia wondered if that had been a mistake. The night before, unable to sleep in the stuffy tent she shared with 3 other girls, Nia had wandered down to the lake for some air. She'd found Eliza there, sobbing into her hands like her world was ending. Getting the truth out of her had been like pulling teeth, but eventually, the words had tumbled out, a family secret so devastating it explained everything about the Harrington family's obsessive need for control. Eliza's parents weren't just wealthy. They weren't just influential. They were hiding something that went back years, something that involved another girl, another family, another life destroyed to protect the Harrington name. "Your sister," Nia said quietly, watching her friend's face crumple. "Layla. She's still alive, isn't she?" Eliza flinched as if Nia had slapped her. "Don't say her name. Please." "But she is. That's why your parents are so weird about family photos. Why your mom gets that look whenever someone mentions having daughters plural. Layla was the scandal they couldn't control, so they just erased her." The story had come out in pieces. Layla Harrington, Eliza's older half-sister, born when Eliza's father was still married to his first wife. A teen pregnancy that threatened the family's reputation. A girl who asked too many questions, caused too much trouble, reminded too many people of inconvenient truths. So they'd made her disappear, not physically, but socially. Private institutions. Distant relatives. A carefully constructed fiction that Eliza was an only child. "She writes to me sometimes," Eliza had whispered through her tears. "Letters I'm not supposed to see. She's in a place upstate. Says she wants to come home, but Mom and Dad, they say it would destroy everything we've built." Nia had held her friend as she cried, but inside she was furious. The Harringtons had money, power, respect, everything Nia's family struggled for. And they'd used it to throw away their own daughter like yesterday's newspaper. "You have to do something," Nia had said. "You can't just let them keep her locked away. You don't understand. If people knew about Layla, about what really happened, Dad's business, Mom's charity work, everything would fall apart. They'd never forgive me. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing things that don't matter." Eliza had looked at her with something that might have been admiration or might have been fear. Easy for you to say. You don't have anything to lose. The words had stung, mainly because they were true. Nia's family didn't have a reputation to protect, just bills to pay and dreams to chase. But that was exactly why she couldn't stay silent. Someone had to speak for girls like Layla, girls whose voices had been stolen by people with power. Now, standing by the lake in the morning light, Nia could see the fear in her best friend's eyes. Fear of exposure, of consequences, of losing the comfortable cage her parents had built around their perfect family image. I can't unknow what I know, Liz. And I can't pretend it doesn't matter. Eliza's hands were shaking. What are you going to do? I'm going to help her. Layla deserves to have someone fighting for her. Nia, please. You don't know my parents. They're not bad people, they threw away their own daughter to protect their image. What do you think they'll do to me? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Eliza opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. In that moment of silence, Nia saw the truth her friend couldn't speak. The Harringtons would do whatever it took to protect their secrets. And a 15-year-old black girl with no family connections was expendable. I'm sorry, Eliza whispered, but she wouldn't meet Nia's eyes. Nia nodded slowly. She'd expected this, had seen it coming the moment Eliza started making excuses. Fear made people do terrible things, even to the people they loved. Especially to the people they loved. I know you are. But sorry doesn't help, Layla. She turned and walked back toward the campsite, leaving Eliza standing alone by the water. Her silver necklace, the one her grandmother had given her for her 15th birthday, caught on a low branch as she passed. She paused to untangle it, then thought better of it. Let it stay. Let it be a reminder that some things were worth fighting for, even when you had to fight alone. The camp was starting to wake up. She could hear Mr. Peterson's booming voice organizing breakfast duties and see smoke rising from the cooking fire. Her 10 mates were probably wondering where she'd gone. Life was moving forward, oblivious to the fault lines that had opened in the night. Nia made her decision as she walked. She would call her mother as soon as they got back to town. Then she would find a way to contact Layla directly. The Harringtons might have money and influence, but Nia had something they'd forgotten how to use: courage. She never made it back to the campsite. When the other students woke an hour later, Nia Parker was gone. Her sleeping bag was cold, her backpack missing, her hiking boots nowhere to be found. The only trace left behind was that silver necklace, hanging from a pine branch like a prayer flag, catching the morning light with every breath of wind. The search began immediately. Teachers, students, and local rangers combed every trail, checked every cave, called her name until their voices gave out. But Pine Lake kept its secrets well, and by nightfall, they had found nothing. Eliza stood at the water's edge as the searchers returned empty-handed, her face pale as winter. When the police asked what she and Nia had talked about that morning, she looked down at her hands and whispered, "Nothing important. Just girl stuff." The lie came so easily, it was almost like she'd been practicing her whole life. 5 years had passed since Nia Parker vanished into the morning mist at Pine Lake, but for Eliza Harrington, it felt like yesterday and forever at the same time. At 20, Eliza sat in Dr. Martinez's office every Tuesday at 3 p.m., picking at the threads of her sweater while carefully avoiding the real reason she was there. The therapy sessions were her mother's idea, a way to process the trauma of losing a friend, though they both knew trauma was too simple a word for what Eliza carried. "You seem distracted today," Dr. Martinez observed, setting down her pen. "Want to talk about what's on your mind?" Eliza's fingers found the scar on her palm where she'd dug her nails and so deep during Nia's memorial service that she'd drawn blood. "Just school stress. My psychology professor assigned us to research suppressed memory and guilt. It's heavy material." It wasn't entirely a lie. Professor Chin had indeed assigned the research project, but Eliza had volunteered for the topic. Somewhere in her subconscious, she was looking for answers to questions she couldn't ask out loud. "That does sound challenging," Any particular aspect you're focusing on? How guilt can literally change your brain chemistry. How suppressed memories surface when the mind is ready to handle them. Eliza's voice dropped to almost a whisper. How some secrets eat you alive from the inside. Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. This was as close as Eliza had ever come to discussing Nia directly. In 3 years of sessions, she danced around the edges, talking about anxiety, family pressure, and academic stress, anything but the girl who disappeared because she trusted Eliza with the truth. Secrets can be incredibly isolating, Dr. Martinez said carefully. Sometimes sharing them, even partially, can provide relief. But Eliza was already retreating, that familiar wall sliding back into place. I should go. I have a paper to finish. The drive back to campus took her past Jefferson High, where a small memorial plaque near the main entrance still bore Nia's name. In memory of Nia Parker, may her voice never be forgotten. The irony wasn't lost on Eliza. Nia's voice had been forgotten, erased as completely as if she'd never existed. The investigation had stalled after 6 months. The media had moved on to newer tragedies. Even Nia's mother had stopped calling for updates. Only Eliza remembered what Nia had really been fighting for. That night, alone in her apartment, Eliza did something she'd avoided for 5 years. She opened Nia's old social media profiles, preserved like a digital shrine by her family. Photo after photo showed a girl blazing with life and purpose, Nia at the science fair, Nia volunteering at the food bank, Nia giving a speech about educational equity that had made the local news. One post stopped Eliza cold. It was dated just 2 days before the camping trip. Sometimes you learn things that make you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. But silence isn't protection, it's complicity. If we don't speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, who will? #Justice Matters, #Speak Truth. The comments were full of hearts and fire emojis from classmates who thought Nia was just being philosophical. But Eliza knew better. This post was about Layla. About the secret that had died with Nia in those pine woods. Except, what if it hadn't died? Eliza's hands shook as she scrolled through more posts, looking for clues she'd been too afraid to see before. There, 3 weeks before the camping trip, Nia had shared an article about reform in private psychiatric institutions. And before that, a piece about family reunification services. She'd been researching. She'd been planning. The dreams started that night. In them, Eliza was 15 again, standing by Pine Lake in the pre-dawn darkness. But this time, she could see what happened after she walked away. She watched Nia pack her belongings with quiet determination. Watched her write something in her journal by flashlight. Watched her slip away from the campsite like a ghost seeking justice. But dreams were just dreams, weren't they? Guilt playing tricks on a mind that couldn't accept the randomness of tragedy. The breakthrough came during a particularly intense nightmare 3 weeks later. Eliza woke gasping, Nia's voice echoing in her head. Check her journal. And the attic. It was nonsense. Nia's journal had never been found, and what did the attic have to do with anything? But the words felt important, urgent, like a message she was finally ready to receive. Her parents still lived in the same house, still maintained the same suffocating perfection they'd always demanded. The family dinner invitations came monthly, duty disguised as affection. Eliza attended just enough to avoid questions, playing the part of the grateful daughter who'd learned not to rock the boat. But she'd never stopped thinking about Layla. The attic had always been off limits, locked away like everything else inconvenient in the Harrington household. As a child, Eliza had been told it was just storage, old furniture, holiday decorations, nothing interesting. She'd never questioned it. Now she wondered what else might be stored up there. The plan formed slowly, carefully. Her parents were attending a charity gala next weekend, the kind of event that consumed their entire evening. She would have hours to explore, to finally confront the shadows that had been haunting her dreams. But first, she needed insurance. Someone who would listen if she found what she feared she might find. Someone who specialized in bringing buried truths to light. Eliza had been listening to Cold Truth for months, a podcast hosted by a former journalist named Leah Mendez who'd made a name for herself revisiting forgotten cases. The show had helped solve 3 missing person cases and exposed corruption in 2 police departments. If anyone could handle what Eliza suspected she might discover, it was Leah. The email took her 4 hours to write. Dear Ms. Mendez, I have information about a case that went cold 5 years ago. A girl named Nia Parker who disappeared during a school camping trip. The police looked in all the wrong places. If you're interested in the truth, check her journal. And check the attic. A concerned citizen. She sent it from a fake email account, then immediately regretted it. What if she was wrong? What if the dreams were just guilt-induced fantasies? What if she was about to destroy what was left of her family for nothing? But late that night, as she lay staring at the ceiling, Eliza heard Nia's voice again. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing things that don't matter. 5 years too late, she was finally ready to listen. Leah Mendez had received hundreds of cryptic emails over the years. But something about this one made her coffee grow cold as she read it for the 3rd time. Check her journal. And the attic. The message was either from someone with genuine inside knowledge or someone playing elaborate games with a grieving family. She pulled up the Nia Parker case files she'd been collecting for months. A 15-year-old honor student vanishes without a trace during a school camping trip. No body found, no real leads. Investigation goes cold after 6 months. On the surface, it looked like every parent's worst nightmare, a random tragedy in the wilderness. But Leah's instincts, honed by 15 years of investigative journalism before she'd started, cold truth, told her there was more to the story. The Nia Parker episode aired on a rainy Thursday morning in October, exactly 5 years and 2 months after the disappearance. Leah had titled it, "The Girl Who Knew Too Much," and within hours of release, her inbox was flooded. "This case has haunted me since day one," she told her listeners, her voice carrying that careful balance of empathy and determination that had made her podcast so successful. A brilliant young woman with everything to live for, gone without explanation. But what if the explanation was there all along? What if we just weren't looking in the right places? She'd done her homework. Interviews with Nia's mother, Diane Parker, had revealed a daughter passionate about justice, someone who couldn't stay quiet when she saw wrongdoing. Teachers described a student who asked uncomfortable questions and wasn't satisfied with easy answers. Nia wasn't the type to just wander off. Diane Parker's voice cracked through the podcast speakers. She was responsible, careful. If she left that campsite, she had a reason. But it was the interview with Mr. Peterson, the teacher who'd organized the camping trip, that provided the first real crack in the official story. "I keep thinking about that last morning," he admitted. Nia seemed different. Focused, like she'd made some kind of decision. And Eliza Harrington, her best friend, she was acting strange too. Jumpy, wouldn't make eye contact. I should have paid more attention. The Harrington name made Leah's antennae twitch. Old money families didn't usually have teenagers involved in missing person cases unless there was more to the story. A quick background check revealed the kind of pristine public image that often hid messy private realities. 3 days after the episode aired, Leah's phone rang. "Ms. Mendez? This is Margaret Chin. I used to work for the Harrington family. I heard your podcast, and well, there are things you should know." Margaret had been the Harringtons' housekeeper for 7 years, from when Eliza was in middle school until she graduated high school. She'd been let go abruptly just 2 weeks after Nia's disappearance, given a generous severance package and asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. "They told me it was budget cuts." Margaret's voice was careful, measured. "But the Harringtons don't have budget problems. They have image problems." They met at a diner 30 miles outside town, Margaret nervously stirring sugar into coffee she didn't drink while Leah's recorder sat between them like a confessional. "That family has more secrets than an agency," Margaret began. "Mrs. Harrington would get these letters sometimes. Always threw them away immediately, but I saw the return address once. Some place upstate called Willowbrook Residential Care." Leah's pulse quickened. Residential care facilities were often code for institutions that families used to hide inconvenient relatives. Did you ever hear them mention someone named Layla? Margaret's eyes widened. How did you? Yes. Yes, I did. Mr. Harrington was on the phone once, arguing with someone about Layla. Said something about keeping her where she belongs and protecting the family legacy. When he saw me listening, he went pale as a sheet. The next revelation was even more explosive. Margaret pulled out her phone and showed Leah a photo she'd taken years ago, a family portrait in the Harringtons' hallway that had mysteriously disappeared one day. I took this picture because I thought it was strange, Margaret explained. Look at the frame on the mantel. Leah zoomed in. There, barely visible in the reflection of the glass, was part of another photograph that had been hastily turned face down. In that reflection, she could make out what looked like a third person, someone who'd been deliberately excluded from the family's public image. But the bombshell came from an unexpected source. 3 hours after Leah posted a follow-up episode about Margaret's revelations, she received a message from a listener in Vermont. I work at a coffee shop near Willowbrook. The message read, There's a girl who comes in sometimes, maybe mid-20s, always pays cash, never gives her real name. But she looks exactly like that Harrington girl from your photos. And last week, she was crying while listening to your podcast on her headphones. Leah's investigation was pulling threads that threatened to unravel more than just the Harrington family's carefully constructed facade. She'd started looking for a missing black teenager and stumbled onto what appeared to be a decades-long cover-up involving hidden family members and institutional abuse. The episode that changed everything aired 2 weeks later. Leah had managed to track down 3 former employees of Willowbrook, all of whom confirmed that a young woman matching Layla Harrington's description had been a resident for over 5 years. More importantly, one of them remembered her talking about a sister named Eliza and expressing desperate wishes to go home. The thing about family secrets, Leah told her listeners, is that they're like pressure cookers. Eventually, something has to give. The pressure was building on the Harrington family. Local news stations had picked up the story. Social media was buzzing with theories and accusations. And somewhere in the shadows, Eliza Harrington was watching her perfectly constructed world begin to crumble. But the real earthquake was still coming. Because 3 days after that episode aired, Leah received another anonymous email from her mysterious tipster. You're getting close. But Nia's story and Layla's story are more connected than you know. Check the camping trip photos again. Look for what's hidden in plain sight. This time, the email included an attachment, a photograph from the camping trip that had never been part of the official investigation. In it, barely visible in the background, was a figure Leah hadn't expected to see, Mrs. Harrington herself, talking to Nia Parker in the woods, hours before the girl vanished. The question wasn't just what had happened to Nia Parker anymore. The question was how far the Harrington family had gone to keep their secrets buried, and whether they'd buried a girl along with them. The photograph hit the internet like a lightning strike. Within hours, it was shared across every social media platform, analyzed frame by amateur detectives who zoomed in on Mrs. Harrington's face, her body language, the way she seemed to be pleading with Nia in the shadows of the pine trees. Eliza saw it first on her laptop in her apartment, the familiar dread settling in her stomach like ice water. Her mother's face was partially obscured, but she recognized the stance, the desperate hand gestures that meant someone was about to cross a line they couldn't uncross. Her phone buzzed. Mom calling. Eliza, honey, you need to come home. Now. The Harrington house looked the same as always, imposing colonial architecture designed to project stability and success. But inside, the careful facade was cracking. Her father paced the living room like a caged animal, while her mother sat rigid on the sofa, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. They want to search the house, her father said without preamble. That podcast woman has stirred up enough trouble that the police are taking her seriously. What did you tell them? Our lawyer handled it. We've managed to delay the warrant, but not for long. He stopped pacing and fixed Eliza with a stare that made her feel 15 again. We need to know you're with us on this. Family first, remember? Family first. The Harrington motto that had justified everything from tax evasion to social climbing to erasing inconvenient daughters. Eliza nodded mechanically, but inside, something was shifting. What really happened that night, Mom? Her mother's composed mask slipped for just a moment. What do you mean? In the photo. You were talking to Nia. What did you say to her? The silence stretched until her father cleared his throat. Your friend was making threats, Eliza. About things she didn't understand. Your mother simply tried to reason with her. Threats about Layla. Both parents flinched at the name. Even after all these years, their oldest daughter's existence was still a wound they couldn't acknowledge. That's enough, her father snapped. What's done is done. We protected this family then, and we'll protect it now. But Eliza was no longer listening. She was thinking about the dream that had been haunting her sleep. Check her journal. And the attic. She dismissed it as guilt-induced fantasy. But what if it wasn't? What if some part of her subconscious had been trying to tell her something all along? The charity gala was Saturday night. 2 days to work up the courage to do what she should have done 5 years ago. The attic key was hidden in her father's study, tucked behind a row of law books like a guilty secret. Eliza's hands trembled as she climbed the narrow stairs, each creak of the old wood sounding like thunder in the silent house. The attic was exactly what she'd expected. Boxes of Christmas decorations, old furniture draped in sheets, the detritus of a family that never threw anything away. But in the far corner, behind a wall panel she almost missed, was a small alcove that made her blood run cold. It looked like a shrine. Or a crime scene. There were photographs scattered across a small table, pictures of Layla as a child, as a teenager, recent photos that could only have come from surveillance. Letters in envelopes marked "Returned to sender." And in the center of it all, a journal that made Eliza's heart stop. It was purple with silver stars, Nia's journal, the one that had never been found. With shaking hands, Eliza opened it to the last entry, dated the morning of her disappearance. I can't stay silent anymore. Layla deserves better than being locked away because she's inconvenient. The Harringtons think they can control everything, but some things are bigger than their reputation. If something happens to me, if I don't make it home, I want people to know I tried to do the right thing. Check the attic. The truth is always hidden in the places people are afraid to look. But even as relief flooded through her, Nia had known, had suspected what might happen. Something felt wrong. The handwriting was too neat, too careful. Nia's real handwriting was messier, more rushed. This looked like someone had been practicing, trying to imitate her friend's voice. Eliza flipped through more pages. The entries were all wrong, events that hadn't happened, feelings that didn't match the Nia she'd known. Someone had created this journal after the fact, filling it with a narrative that painted Nia as an unstable girl obsessed with conspiracy theories. Her parents had been planning for this moment all along. Behind the journal, she found a small metal box hidden in the wall cavity. Inside were more photographs, but these were different. One showed a girl who looked like Nia from behind, same build, same hair, but when Eliza turned it over, the name scrawled on the back made her gasp. Layla, age 15. The resemblance was uncanny. Both girls were the same height, same general build. Both had been 15 when their lives intersected with the Harrington family's secrets. It was a resemblance that could be exploited, manipulated, used to create confusion about what had really happened that night. More photographs showed the family cabin upstate, the one they'd owned for decades but rarely talked about. Pictures of the interior, the basement, detailed shots that looked like documentation rather than family memories. The final photograph was the one that shattered everything she thought she knew. It showed her parents with a man in a uniform, someone official-looking, standing outside what was clearly an institutional building. On the back, in her father's handwriting, payment arrangements for LH keep her comfortable and quiet. They hadn't just hidden Layla. They'd bought her silence. Eliza's phone buzzed with a text from Leah Mendez. New episode dropping tomorrow. Someone's been sending me evidence about your family's cabin. You might want to listen. The walls were closing in. The podcast had momentum now, listeners who'd become invested in finding the truth. Her parents' careful control was slipping, and desperate people did desperate things. She took photos of everything with shaking hands, then carefully replaced it all exactly as she'd found it. But she kept one thing, a letter addressed to Layla in Nia's handwriting, real handwriting this time, that must have been intercepted before it could be sent. Dear Layla, I don't know if you'll ever get this, but I want you to know someone is fighting for you. Your sister told me your story, and I can't let it end this way. I'm going to find a way to bring you home. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who refuse to give up on you. Stay strong. Help is coming. Nia. The letter was dated 3 days before the camping trip. Nia had been planning to help Layla long before she'd confided in Eliza. And somehow, that letter had ended up in the Harrington attic, which meant her parents had known exactly what Nia was planning. They'd known, and they'd stopped her. As Eliza climbed down from the attic, she realized the dreams hadn't been guilt or imagination. They'd been memory, fragments of conversations she'd overheard, details her conscious mind had refused to process, truths her 15-year-old self hadn't been ready to face. But she was ready now. The confrontation came at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning, when Eliza's parents returned from their gala to find their daughter sitting in the living room with a manila envelope in her lap and 5 years of suppressed rage burning in her eyes. We need to talk, Eliza said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Her mother still wore her evening gown, diamonds glittering at her throat like tiny accusations. Her father had loosened his bow tie, but his spine remained rigid with the kind of control that had defined the Harrington family for generations. It's late, sweetheart, her mother began, but Eliza cut her off. I found the attic room. I found everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Her parents exchanged a look that contained decades of shared secrets, and Eliza saw the exact moment they decided to stop pretending. Her father sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with Layla. Her mother's facade finally cracked, tears spilling down her carefully made-up cheeks. She was never supposed to be part of this family. Your father was young, made a mistake with his secretary. When she got pregnant, we thought we could handle it quietly. But Layla wasn't quiet, was she? She was troubled, her father said defensively. Acting out, asking questions about why she couldn't live with us, threatening to go to the press about being abandoned. We found her a nice place, somewhere she could get help. You bought her silence. We gave her care she needed. The words exploded out of him, then he caught himself, smoothed his voice back to its usual controlled tone. The arrangement worked for everyone. She was safe, comfortable, and our family could move forward. Eliza pulled out the intercepted letter, watching her parents' faces as she read Nia's words aloud. Help is coming, she finished. Nia was going to expose everything, wasn't she? Her mother nodded miserably. That girl was so righteous, so determined to fix things that weren't her business. She didn't understand the consequences. What consequences? That people would know you abandoned your own daughter. That our family would be destroyed. Her father's control finally snapped. 20 years of building a reputation, a business, a legacy, all of it would have been ruined by one girl's misguided sense of justice. So you stopped her. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Her mother buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded like they'd been building for years. We never meant for it to go so far, she whispered. I just wanted to talk to her, to make her understand. Your father suggested we take her to the cabin, somewhere private where we could explain why she needed to stay quiet. Eliza felt sick. You kidnapped her. We convinced her to come with us. Her father corrected, as if the distinction mattered. Told her we'd take her to see Layla if she just listened to our side of the story first. She was so eager to help, so trusting. What happened at the cabin? Her mother looked up, mascara streaking down her face like black tears. She wouldn't listen. Kept saying she was going to call the authorities as soon as she got back, that Layla deserved better, that we were monsters. She was so angry, so determined. We locked her in the basement. her father said flatly. Just until we could figure out what to do. We brought her food, blankets. We weren't trying to hurt her. But when you went back, she was gone. Her parents nodded in unison, and for the first time, Eliza saw real fear in their eyes. The window, her mother whispered. It was small, but she was skinny enough to squeeze through. We searched everywhere, called her name, but she just vanished. We thought she'd gone home, her father added quickly. When the search party started, we assumed she'd made it back and was just afraid to tell anyone what really happened. But she never came home. No. Her mother's voice broke completely. She never came home. And by then, we'd already committed to the story. We'd already told the police we'd never seen her after the camping trip. We couldn't take it back without destroying everything. Eliza stared at her parents, these people who'd raised her, who taught her about family loyalty and protecting what mattered. They looked smaller now, diminished by the weight of their choices. So you created the fake journal. Made it look like she was unstable, obsessed with conspiracy theories. Insurance, her father said quietly. In case her real journal ever surfaced. We needed people to question her credibility. And Layla? Does she know? Her mother shook her head. We told her Nia had changed her mind, decided it was too dangerous to get involved. Layla was devastated, but she believed us. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Nia had escaped the cabin but found herself alone in unfamiliar wilderness, possibly injured, definitely traumatized. Without her phone, without transportation, miles from the nearest town. She could have died from exposure, gotten lost, fallen into a ravine. Or she could have survived and been too afraid to come forward, knowing the Harringtons would deny everything and destroy her credibility. I'm calling Leah Mendez, Eliza said, standing up with the envelope clutched in her hands. I'm giving her everything. Eliza, please. Her mother reached for her, but Eliza stepped back. Think about what you're doing. This will destroy us. Is that really what you want? For a moment, Eliza wavered. These were her parents, flawed and desperate, but still the people who'd loved her, raised her, given her every advantage. Turning them in meant losing them forever. But then she thought about Nia's letter to Layla, about a 15-year-old girl so determined to help someone she'd never met that she'd risked everything. She thought about Layla, still trapped in an institution, still believing the lie that no one cared enough to fight for her. Some things are more important than family reputation, Eliza said, echoing words Nia had spoken 5 years too late for her to hear. Justice matters. Truth matters. She walked out of the house with the envelope in her hands and didn't look back. The search team found the Harrington cabin on a crisp Tuesday morning, exactly where Eliza's evidence had indicated it would be. Detective Ray Sullivan had seen a lot in his 20-year career, but walking through that basement with its scratched walls and makeshift lock told a story that made his stomach turn. She was here, he radioed back to base. Definite signs of confinement. We need the forensics team up here now. The cabin had been abandoned for years, but it held its secrets well. In the root cellar behind the main structure, investigators found what they'd been looking for, a weathered backpack with Anait Parker written in faded marker, a journal filled with her real handwriting, and clothes that DNA testing would later confirm belonged to the missing girl. But the journal entries painted a picture no one had expected. Day 3, made it to the road finally. Truck driver gave me a ride to Burlington. He was kind, didn't ask too many questions when I said I was visiting family. I can't go home yet. They'll never believe me over the Harringtons. Need to get stronger, smarter. Need proof. Day 15. Found a shelter that doesn't ask for ID. Working at a diner for cash. The owner reminds me of my mom, tough but fair. I think about calling home every day, but what if they find me? What if they make me disappear for real this time? Day 47. New identity papers are expensive, but I'm saving up. Emmett, and that's who I am now. Far enough from Nia Parker to stay hidden, close enough to remember who I used to be. The entries continued for months, detailing a 15-year-old girl's desperate attempt to build a new life while staying hidden from people with enough power to erase her completely. The final entry was dated almost 3 years after her disappearance. Day 1087, got my GED today. Emma Chin graduated with honors. It doesn't feel like victory though. Somewhere, my mom still thinks I'm finished. Somewhere, Layla is still trapped. I'm not strong enough yet to take them on, but I'm getting there. One day, I'll be ready to come home. Detective Sullivan closed the journal with shaking hands. They weren't looking for a body anymore. They were looking for a survivor. The DNA match came back 3 days later, confirming what the journal had suggested. Emma Chin, a 20-year-old social worker in Brattleboro, Vermont, was Nia Parker. She'd been hiding in plain sight for 5 years, working with at-risk youth and living under an identity carefully constructed to keep her safe from the people who tried to silence her. When the police knocked on her apartment door, Nia had been expecting them. Leah Mendez's podcast had reached her weeks ago, and she'd been watching the investigation unfold with a mixture of hope and terror. "I always knew this day would come," she said quietly, inviting Detective Sullivan into her small but tidy apartment. Photos of the kids she worked with covered one wall: teenagers who'd aged out of foster care, runaways, kids who needed someone to believe in them. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Sullivan asked gently. Nia looked older than her 20 years, marked by experiences that had forced her to grow up too fast. "Because I was 15 and terrified. Because the Harringtons had money and lawyers and reputation, and I had nothing. Who would have believed me? Your mother never stopped looking for you." Tears filled Nia's eyes for the first time since the detective had arrived. "I know. I used to drive by the house sometimes, just to see if she was okay. But I couldn't risk it. Not until I was strong enough to fight back." The reunion happened 3 days later, in a conference room at the Vermont State Police Barracks. Diane Parker hadn't aged well in the 5 years since her daughter's disappearance. Grief had carved lines around her eyes and turned her hair prematurely gray. But when Nia walked through that door, 20 years seemed to fall away from her face. They held each other and cried for 20 minutes straight. 5 years of grief and hope and desperate love pouring out in a small room while investigators tactfully looked away. "I'm so sorry, baby," Diane whispered through her tears. "I should have protected you better." "You did protect me," Nia replied. "You taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." The legal proceedings moved swiftly after that. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington were arrested on charges of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and obstruction of justice. Their lawyers argued for reduced sentences based on their age and standing in the community, but the judge wasn't swayed. "These defendants used their wealth and privilege to commit serious crimes against a child," Judge Martinez stated during sentencing. "Money does not place anyone above the law." Eliza testified against her parents, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. She'd lost her family to tell the truth, but she'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that she'd finally done the right thing. The most emotional moment came when Nia and Layla finally met. After 5 years of institutional care, Layla was fragile but determined to rebuild her life. The sisters, because that's what they were now, bound by shared trauma and mutual rescue, held hands as they spoke to reporters. "Family isn't just about blood," Nia said, echoing words she'd written to Layla years ago. "It's about the people who refuse to give up on you, who fight for you even when you can't fight for yourself." Leah Mendez's final episode of the series ended with audio from that press conference. As Nia's voice faded out, Leah's closing words resonated with listeners around the world. "Nia Parker vanished into the woods 5 years ago, but she never really disappeared. She survived. She grew stronger. She built a life dedicated to helping others who couldn't help themselves. Her story reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't standing up and fighting. Sometimes it's lying low, staying safe, and waiting until you're strong enough to win." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "She vanished. But she lived. And now, finally, her story is heard.